Gonna be honest with you, I am not a big basketball fan. I know that may sound weird coming from a guy who covers sports, but I never was any good at it. And quite frankly, in my career as a sports information director, I had to cover an awful lot of it and then just kind of got burnt out on it. Now, having said that, basketball may be one of the most fun events to cover, whether it's for print, for broadcast, or for broadcasting the game live. So let's talk about it. As with all the other sports we cover, let's first talk about the basics. Remember, college basketball is played in 40 minutes with two 20-minute halves. High school basketball is 32 minutes with four 8-minute quarters. Women's college basketball is also 40 minutes, but it is four 10-minute quarters. Ironically, college men's basketball is the only form of basketball that is played in halves instead of quarters. Don't ask me why. The dimensions of courts differ in high school, college, professional, and international, where the 3-point mark is, how wide and how long the court is. Funny story, I didn't realize that the courts were smaller in high school until I talked to a friend of mine and just I didn't cover a lot of high school basketball and was at the game and looked at the court and I said, this doesn't look right. So I contacted him. He said, yep, high school smaller. So there you go. Before you get into the game, you need to check for stats and trends on individual scoring, team scoring, rebounding, fouls, players fouling out a lot, those types of things. Do focus on some of the key stats for the lead players, and this isn't always points. Some great players are better passers. Some are better at blocking shots, those types of things. So think about those stats. Fun story for you. Magic Johnson, my all-time favorite basketball player. He was called Magic because of the beautiful passes that he could make. And he was asked one time, how did you become such a good passer? And he said, when I played basketball, all of my buddies wanted to score, and I wanted to win. I realized there was only one ball. So only 5 players couldn't score at the same time, so I was going to work on my passing to set them up so they could score so I could win. There you go. As in baseball, the players are numbered. The 1 is obviously the point guard, 2 is the shooting guard, 3 small forward, 4 power forward, 5 center. Note there are a variety of penalties, personal fouls, and serious fouls that happen during basketball games. Learn the terminology of basketball because it is vast. There are a lot of different terms to study, to learn. Okay, now you've learned the basics, so get ready to go cover that game. You need to show up early and get the lineups from the official score so you know who's going to be starting. So then you can see who are the key backups. You might find out that a starter who's been starting every game is now sitting on the bench, and that's going to give you something to take a look at. Record the names of the officials. Do not put these into your story. I don't know what it is about basketball, but it seems to me more than any other sport, even more so than baseball, fans like to yell at the officials. You just want to know their names for your own information. You are not going to put that in the story. Establish some relationships. Get to know the sports information director if you're covering a college game because that's the person who's going to be giving you the statistics. Obviously, you want to get to know the coaches. The first time you go to cover a basketball game does not want to be the first time that you meet that coach. Get to know them so they can trust you, so you can learn to trust them, so you can have better interviews after the game. And then check the all-time win-loss records between the teams. Sometimes there's one team that's just really been dominant. Other times it's a 50-50 battle, and it makes for a really interesting story that way. Okay, the ball has gone up. It's time to watch the game, and here's some things to watch for. Number one, basketball is a game of runs. One team may get off on a 10-2 run. That's big time because they can really establish a lead or they can close a gap. The other team may then go on an 8-0 run, and all of a sudden, boom, the game is tied. So watch for those runs as they happen. Also watch for scoring droughts. If a team just cannot hit a bucket, we always talk about that somebody put a lid on the hoop. Look at those types of things. Have they been hitting really well from 3-point range coming into this game, and now all of a sudden they can't hit a bull in the butt with a bass fiddle? Think about that and look for those types of things. Determine which team goes to the free throw line most frequently. A lot of times we'll talk about why one team fouled more than the other, or one team got a whole lot more trips to the free throw line than the other team. Well, look at their style of play. A team that really tries to penetrate a lot on offense is going to get to the free throw line more because they're going to get fouled more. A team that spends a lot of time passing the ball around the perimeter and taking a lot of 3-point shots, not a lot of trips to the free throw line because there aren't a lot of fouls that happen outside the arc. So keep an eye on that. Watch for hustle plays and good technique where teams defensive player did a really nice job of moving his feet. Didn't get a lot of reach-ins, didn't get a lot of fouls, but really was able to clamp down on an opposing player. Do again focus on their shot selection if they try and penetrate or if they keep it outside. Watch for player reactions. Do they get mad when they get fouled, or are they missing a lot of shots and they're still keeping their cool and they're maybe picking their game up on the defensive end? So keep track of that. Think about the rebounds. Note how the coaches make adjustments. Maybe one team is really hitting the ball from the outside, and so they switch into a man-to-man to really try and put the clamps on. Compare their styles of tempo. Does one team do a lot of full court press and the other team really tries to slow things down? Look at the individual matchups. Do you have somebody get in a mismatch? Maybe one team comes in with a 6'11 center and the other team's center is only 6'5. That can play a big part in the game. Focus on the points scored in the paint. Again, that shows one team's penetrating a lot. That team should end up with a lot more fouls. See if that matches up. And then look for stat trends over a series of games. Does one team really shoot the ball well from three-point range, but they're not penetrating a lot? Or does one team maybe not shooting the ball very well, but they're getting a lot of rebounds, they're getting a lot of blocked shots, they're getting a lot of steals. So maybe they're focusing a lot more on their defense. Here are some of the questions that you're going to want to ask players and coaches after the game. Talking about key plays, talking to them about what worked in the game, what didn't work in the game, what they were, maybe something that surprised them, something that was unexpected. Talk to them about the other team and what that team did well, how their team maybe adapted to what their opponent was doing, or how the opponent adapted to what they were trying to do. Talk to them about maybe what they did in practice to prepare for this game, things of that nature. One thing that you never ever want to ask is, how did you feel out there? I had a former student who, during a press conference after a regional basketball game, that was the question he asked one of our players. How did you feel out there? What does that mean? What are you trying to get at with that kind of a question? Make your questions meaningful and make them something by which the coach or the player is going to be able to expand. Not a lot of yes/no questions. Get them to give you some details of the game. And finally, it's time to write. Again, basketball is a game of runs, so break those down and focus on those. Don't just focus on the leading scorer. Yes, the leading scorer may have scored 50 points. Obviously, that's something you're going to want to consider. But if the leading scorer only had 18 points and you had somebody else who had 15 rebounds and 5 block shots, that person might be the one you want to talk about because that was a great defensive effort. So keep that in mind. Note the superlatives. If somebody breaks a record, if somebody has a long string going, if somebody has recorded their third or fourth double-double in a row, something like that. Okay? Basketball, more than any other sport, is a game where you want to think about the reserves and the bench players. Because of the fast tempo and the constant motion in basketball, you see a lot of substitutions. And if you see a lot of those substitutions and those bench players are coming in and really contributing a lot of points, or they're contributing a lot of points in the paint, or they're shutting down the offensive effort of the other team, that is really something to note. The only other time I can think of in any other sport where reserves are really focused upon is relief pitchers in baseball. That's really the only other reserve players that come into a game that get a whole lot of attention, because in basketball, those reserves are critical. All right. Cite how the team scored during their scoring run. Did they just penetrate a lot and got a lot of free throws? Did they hit several three-pointers in a row? Did they have a mix of that? Did they get a lot of breakaway points, meaning that they played great defense and got a lot of points in transition? Those types of things can give your reader or give your viewer an idea of the pace of the game. And as always, focus on the game's significance. Are they still undefeated at home? Did this game set them up to win a conference championship? Was this their first road win in so many weeks? Those are things to think about, okay? And then finally, of course, when writing, think about your AP style book, because there's a lot of common basketball terms that you're going to need to be aware of.